If betrayal had a sound, Amara would later describe it as soft laughter behind a half-closed door at 2:13 in the morning. At 9:47 p.m., her phone rang. If you're new to this channel, just subscribe now, and say it in the comment section. Amara was folding freshly dried clothes in the living room of their Lekki apartment when Ifunanya's name flashed across her screen. She smiled automatically. 17 years of friendship had trained her heart to soften at that name. She answered on the first ring. "IFU. I was just thinking about you." What came through the speaker wasn't the bubbly, dramatic Ifunanya she knew. It was sobbing. Broken, uncontrollable sobbing. "Amara. I'm outside. I don't know where to go." Amara stood up so quickly a pile of Tunde's shirt slid to the floor. "Outside where?" "Down your street. I've been driving around. Kunnel, he threw me out." "What do you mean threw you out?" "He said he's tired of my attitude. He said I should leave his house. He packed my things, Amara. He packed them." Amara didn't hesitate. "Come over. Just one night. That's all you need. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." She didn't even think to ask Tunde first. Some decisions didn't require permission. When she opened the door 20 minutes later, Ifunanya collapsed into her arms, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her perfectly styled wig was slightly tilted, a designer handbag hanging loosely from her shoulder. "You don't deserve this," Amara whispered, guiding her inside. From the dining area, Tunde looked up from his laptop. His eyes lingered on Ifunanya for half a second too long before he forced a polite smile. "Good evening, Ifunanya." "Sorry for disturbing your home," Ifunanya sniffed. "It's fine," Tunde replied, but his jaw tightened almost invisibly. Amara noticed. Later, in their bedroom, as she arranged fresh sheets in the guest room, Tunde leaned against the doorframe. "How long is she staying?" "Just tonight," Amara said. "She's not stable right now." Tunde shrugged. "You know I don't like strangers in my space." "She's not a stranger. She's my sister." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. Just one night." If only she had heard the weight behind those words. By 11:30 p.m., the house was quiet. Nipa took the light without warning, plunging the apartment into darkness. The inverter kicked in weakly, casting a dim yellow glow across the hallway. Amara lay in bed beside Tunde, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated lazily. "Do you think she'll be okay?" she asked softly. "She'll survive," Tunde replied shortly. Amara turned to face him. "Be kind. She's hurting." He didn't respond. Within minutes, his breathing deepened, steady and rhythmic. Amara eventually drifted off too. At exactly 2:13 a.m., she woke up. She didn't know what pulled her from sleep. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the universe refusing to let her remain ignorant. She stretched her hand across the bed. Cold sheets. She frowned and sat up. "Tunde," she whispered. No answer. The bathroom light was off. The door was open. Her heart began to beat faster, though she didn't know why. She slipped out of bed, adjusting her satin robe, and stepped into the hallway. The guest room door was wide open. The bed inside was empty. A strange buzzing filled her ears. She tried to convince herself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe Ifunanya couldn't sleep. Maybe they were in the kitchen talking. Maybe. Then she heard it. Whispers. A soft, breathy laugh. From her bedroom. Her feet felt heavy, but she moved anyway. One slow step after another. The hallway seemed longer than usual, stretching like a bad dream. The door to her room was slightly pushed inward. Not fully closed. Not fully open. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. She didn't barge in. She didn't scream. She pushed it gently. The sight before her rearranged her entire world in seconds. Tunde sat at the edge of the bed. Ifunanya stood between his knees. His hands were on her waist. Her hands were tangled in his shirt. They were so close their foreheads almost touched. And they were laughing. Laughing. Not shocked. Not confused. Not guilty. Comfortable. Like this was not the first time. Amara felt something inside her go completely still. No tears. No shouting. Just silence. Ifunanya spoke first, her voice low and teasing. What if she wakes up? Tunde chuckled. She sleeps like a log. Relax. Amara's fingers tightened around her phone. In that moment, something sharp and clear formed in her mind. A calm she didn't recognize settled over her like armor. She stepped back quietly before the floorboard could creak. Back into the darkness of the hallway. Back into the woman she was seconds before her marriage died. Inside the living room, her hands moved on autopilot. She unlocked her phone. Opened the camera. Adjusted the brightness. Her breathing steadied. 17 years of friendship. 5 years of marriage. Reduced to whispers at 2:13 a.m. She walked back. This time, she didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open wider, enough to see clearly but not enough to alert them immediately. Through the screen of her phone, the betrayal looked almost unreal. Like a scene from a badly written movie. Tunde leaned forward, brushing his lips against Ifunanya's cheek. "Ifu," he murmured softly. She giggled. Amara recorded everything. Every touch. Every smile. Every careless word. Her hand did not shake. She expected rage. Instead, she felt clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't temptation. This was familiarity. And familiarity meant history. After 2 full minutes, she stepped back again and returned to the living room. She sat on the couch in complete darkness. The inverter light flickered faintly. Her phone screen glowed in her hand, replaying the video silently. She watched it once. Then again. Each replay chipped away at any lingering doubt. She didn't cry. She didn't pray. She planned. At 3:07 a.m., she heard soft footsteps. A door creaked. Water ran briefly in the bathroom. Then the mattress dipped as Tunde returned to bed beside her. He smelled faintly of her perfume. He reached for her waist in his sleep. Amara opened her eyes and stared into the darkness. She allowed his arm to rest on her. Allowed his breathing to settle. Allowed the night to pass. By morning, she would still be Amara. But not the same Amara who answered a phone call at 9:47 p.m. The sun began to rise slowly, pushing pale light through the curtains. And as the first birds chirped outside, Amara finally closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to gather strength. Because some betrayals break you loudly. Others transform you quietly. And Amara had just become very, very quiet. Morning came gently, almost mockingly. Golden sunlight filtered through the curtains as if nothing catastrophic had happened hours earlier. Birds chirped. Cars honked faintly in the distance. Lagos moved on. Amara opened her eyes before Tunde's alarm rang. She stared at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing beside her. He slept peacefully. Peacefully. As if he hadn't dismantled 17 years of loyalty in one careless night. She slowly turned her head and studied his face. The familiar curve of his nose. The faint scar on his chin from a childhood bicycle accident. The man she once believed God handpicked for her. He stirred slightly and tightened his arm around her waist. "Morning," he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. Amara forced her lips into a soft smile he couldn't see in the dim light. Morning. Her voice didn't crack. That surprised even her. He stretched and yawned. I have an early meeting today. Of course you do, she replied calmly. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. The same lips. The same mouth. She held her breath until he got up from the bed. The bathroom door closed. Water ran. Amara sat up slowly. She picked up her phone from the bedside table and opened the video again. She didn't need to watch it. The images were burned into her memory. But she watched anyway. Every second. Every whisper. Every laugh. When the bathroom door opened, she locked her phone and placed it back down. Tunde came out dressed in a towel, wiping his face. Did Ifunanya sleep okay? The audacity. She seemed tired, Amara said evenly. He nodded. Breakups are messy. Amara studied him carefully. There was no flicker of guilt in his eyes. No discomfort. Just ease. He walked to the wardrobe and began dressing. Be nice to her, he added casually. She's going through a lot. Amara almost laughed. Instead, she said softly, I will. By 7:15 a.m., Tunde left for work. He kissed her cheek before walking out the door. Lock the door properly, he said. I will. The door clicked shut. Silence filled the apartment. Amara stood in the center of the living room for a full minute, letting the quiet settle around her. Then she moved. She walked straight to the guest room. Ifunanya was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. Her wig was neatly adjusted. Her makeup redone. Prepared. When she saw Amara at the door, she flinched slightly. Good morning, Ifunanya said, forcing brightness into her voice. Good morning, Amara replied calmly. Their eyes met. There it was. Guilt. Not overwhelming guilt. Just enough. Did you sleep well? Amara asked. Ifunanya hesitated. Not really. I kept thinking about everything. I can imagine. Amara leaned against the doorframe, studying her best friend's face, the face she had confided in for years. The face that had stood beside her on her wedding day, holding her bouquet. The same hands that adjusted her veil. Now those hands had been on her husband's shirt. I'll make breakfast, Amara said suddenly. Ifunanya blinked. You don't have to stress yourself. It's fine, Amara replied. You're my guest. The words tasted different now. In the kitchen, Amara moved with mechanical precision. She sliced ripe plantains carefully. Cracked eggs into a bowl. Chopped peppers and onions. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. Oil sizzled in the pan. Her mind, however, was razor sharp. She wasn't reacting. She was calculating. While the plantain fried, she picked up her phone and stepped into the pantry. She dialed a number saved under Auntie B. The call connected on the second ring. Amara, good morning, my dear. Good morning, Ma. Her voice was steady. Respectful. You sound serious. Is everything okay? Amara inhaled slowly. Ma, I need to speak to you privately. About Tunde. Silence. What about him? It's important. I have proof of something. And I believe you should see it. Another pause. I'm coming, Tunde's mother said quietly. I'll be there before noon. Amara ended the call. The plantain was golden brown now. Perfect. She plated everything neatly on the dining table. Fried plantain. Egg sauce. Freshly brewed tea. When Ifunanya joined her, she avoided eye contact. This smells so good, she said softly. Amara smiled gently. Eat. They sat across from each other. Forks clinked against plates. The silence was thick but controlled. Amara, Ifunanya started cautiously, about last night. Amara looked up immediately. Ifunanya froze. About last night what? Amara asked calmly. I'm sorry if I was restless. I couldn't really sleep. Amara held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she nodded. It's understandable. Ifunanya visibly relaxed. That was her mistake. At 8:32 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Ifunanya frowned. Are you expecting someone? Yes, Amara replied. She walked to the door and opened it. Tunde's mother stood there, dressed elegantly as always, her expression unreadable. Good morning, Ma, Amara greeted respectfully. She stepped aside. When Ifunanya saw who had entered, the color drained from her face. Mummy Tunde, she whispered weakly. Tunde's mother glanced at her briefly but said nothing. Sit, Amara instructed gently. They all sat at the dining table. The food remained untouched. Amara placed her phone carefully on the table. I asked you to come because I believe in transparency, she began calmly. And I believe in evidence. Tunde's mother's eyes narrowed slightly. Amara picked up the phone. Connected it to the TV. Pressed play. The living room filled with familiar whispers. Soft laughter. Tunde's voice. IFU. Ifunanya's hand flew to her mouth. No. Tunde's mother did not blink. She watched the entire video without interrupting. When it ended, silence swallowed the room. Ifunanya burst into tears. It was a mistake. It just happened. Amara turned slowly toward her. Just happened, she repeated softly. Tunde's mother finally spoke. How long? Ifunanya couldn't answer. Amara did. Long enough for comfort. Her voice never rose. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't broken. She was composed. Tunde's mother stood up slowly. Call him. Amara nodded. She dialed Tunde's number and put it on speaker. He answered immediately. Hey, babe. Come home, Amara said evenly. Why? Your mother is here. A pause. I'm in a meeting. Leave it. Something in her tone made him comply. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The call ended. Ifunanya was still crying. Amara, please? I was confused. I was emotional. Amara looked at her with something colder than anger. You were comfortable. At exactly 9:05 a.m., the door opened. Tunde walked in. He stopped when he saw his mother. Then his eyes moved to Ifunanya's tear-stained face. Then to Amara. And finally to the TV screen. What's going on? He asked carefully. Amara picked up the remote. Pressed play again. This time, she watched him instead of the screen. The blood drained from his face. His shoulders stiffened. When the video ended, no one spoke. Tunde swallowed hard. Amara, I can explain. She tilted her head slightly. I'm listening, Amara said calmly. Tunde looked from his mother to Ifunanya, then back to Amara. His mouth opened, then closed again. For a man who always had something to say, words suddenly failed him. It wasn't what it looked like, he began weakly. Amara almost admired the boldness of that sentence. Oh, she asked softly. Because it looked very clear. Tunde ran a hand through his hair. She was upset. She needed comfort. I was just comforting her. Amara finished for him. Yes. With your hands on her waist. Silence. Ifunanya's crying intensified. Please, Amara, don't do this. I was vulnerable. Kunal just threw me out. I wasn't thinking straight. Amara turned to her slowly. You weren't thinking for 17 years. The question hit like a slap. Tunde's mother remained seated, her back straight, her expression carved from stone. Answer her, she said firmly to her son. Tunde avoided everyone's eyes. It's not serious. That was the wrong answer. Amara let out a soft breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. Not serious. He stepped closer to her. It just happened. It was a moment. A moment doesn't look that comfortable, Amara replied evenly. A moment doesn't laugh. Ifunanya covered her face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Amara's eyes were dry. Clear. Focused. You're sorry because you got caught, she said quietly. Not because you did it. Tunde tried again. We didn't plan it. That's interesting, Amara responded. Because the way you held her didn't look spontaneous. Tunde's mother finally stood up. How long? She asked again, her voice sharper now. Tunde remained silent. Ifunanya shook her head, unable to speak. Amara answered for them. Long enough. Tunde snapped slightly. Why are you exaggerating this? The room froze. Amara turned her full attention to him. Exaggerating, she repeated slowly. He sighed in frustration. You're making it bigger than it is. Her calmness deepened. Let me understand, she said gently. My husband and my best friend were in my bed at 2:13 in the morning, and I'm exaggerating. He rubbed his forehead. Amara. No, she cut in softly. Don't say my name like that. Tunde's mother stepped closer to him. You have disgraced yourself, she said coldly. Mummy, please. You brought shame into your home, she continued. And you did it boldly. Ifunanya fell to her knees suddenly. I didn't mean for this to happen. Amara looked down at her. 17 years. Primary school crushes. University heartbreaks. Bridal showers. Shared secrets. Reduced to kneeling on a tiled floor. You meant to walk into my house, Amara said quietly. You meant to cry in my arms. You meant to eat my food. You meant to lie in my guest room. Her voice hardened slightly. But you also meant to walk into my bedroom. Ifunanya shook her head violently. It wasn't planned. Amara nodded slowly. That's the problem. The silence stretched. Then, unexpectedly, Amara pulled out a chair and sat down. Let's eat, she said calmly. All three of them stared at her. Eat. Tunde repeated. Yes, Amara replied. The food is getting cold. Tunde's mother watched her carefully, trying to read her mind. Amara served herself plantain and egg sauce. She took a bite. Chewed. Swallowed. Ifunanya remained frozen on the floor. Stand up, Amara said without looking at her. You're embarrassing yourself. Slowly, Ifunanya rose and returned to her seat. Tunde hesitated before sitting as well. The sound of cutlery filled the air again. Clink. 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 The normalcy was suffocating. After 2 minutes of silence, Amara wiped her mouth with a napkin. I have a surprise for both of you, she announced. Tunde stiffened. What kind of surprise? You'll see. She stood up, picked up her phone again, and connected it to the TV once more. This time, she didn't play the same video. Instead, she opened her gallery and scrolled past screenshots. Bank statements. Property documents. Messages. Tunde's eyes widened slightly. What is this? He asked cautiously. Preparation, Amara answered. She turned to face him fully. You think last night was the beginning? He didn't respond. I've noticed changes for weeks, she continued calmly. Late-night messages. Smiling at your phone. Taking calls outside. She turned to Ifunanya. You started coming around more often. Random visits. Small excuses. Ifunanya's breathing quickened. I wasn't blind, Amara said. I was confirming. Tunde swallowed. So you were spying? I was observing, she corrected. There's a difference. Tunde's mother looked between them. What have you done, Amara? Amara faced her respectfully. I protected myself, Ma. She picked up a brown envelope from the coffee table and handed it to Tunde's mother. Inside were photocopies of property agreements. The house deed. Updated ownership details. Tunde's hands began to shake slightly as he realized what he was looking at. You changed this? He asked in disbelief. Amara nodded once. 2 weeks ago. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible when you sense disrespect. Tunde stood abruptly. You had no right. She remained seated. I had every right. That house is ours. She tilted her head gently. Was. The word hung heavily in the air. Ifunanya looked confused. What's happening? Amara turned to her. You walked into my house confidently last night. She paused deliberately. By noon today, you'll both understand whose house it actually is. Tunde's face darkened. You're overreacting. Amara finally stood up again. For the first time, there was steel in her eyes. No, she said softly. I'm responding. Tunde moved toward her. Amara, calm down. I am calm. You're being dramatic. She stepped closer to him until they were inches apart. You brought another woman into my bed, she said quietly. Don't tell me about drama. Tunde opened his mouth, but no words came out. Amara stepped back. You see, revenge is loud, she continued evenly. It screams. It breaks things. It insults. She looked at both of them. I don't need noise. Ifunanya whispered, please forgive me. Amara's expression didn't change. Forgiveness is not the issue, she replied. Respect is. Tunde's mother exhaled slowly. What do you want, Amara? Amara met her gaze. I want accountability. Tunde's voice cracked slightly. And if I apologize? She looked at him for a long moment. You should. He swallowed. I'm sorry. It sounded small. Empty. She nodded slowly. Noted. Then she turned toward the hallway. Pack your things, she said calmly. Tunde stared at her. What? You heard me. His voice rose. You can't just throw me out. She faced him again. I can. The room felt heavier. You're my wife, he said desperately. And you were my husband, she replied softly. Ifunanya began gathering her handbag with trembling hands. Tunde's mother stepped forward. Son, pack. He looked at her in shock. Mummy? You did this, she said firmly. Now face it. For the first time since morning, panic flashed clearly across Tunde's face. Amara, please, he tried again, lowering his voice. Let's talk privately. We've talked enough, she answered. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. Don't touch me. The words were not loud. But they were final. And in that moment, Tunde understood something he hadn't expected. Amara wasn't breaking. She was done. Tunde stood in the middle of the living room like a man who had suddenly realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid. Amara, you can't be serious, he said slowly. But she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked calmly to the dining table and began clearing the plates. The plantain was half eaten. The tea had gone cold. Domestic routine. Order. Control. It made Tunde uneasy. Amara, he repeated, his voice firmer this time. Stop this nonsense. That word echoed in the room. Nonsense. Tunde's mother turned sharply toward him. Watch how you speak. But Amara didn't look offended. If anything, she seemed almost detached, like someone observing a play she had already memorized. She carried the plates into the kitchen, rinsed them under running water, then dried her hands with a towel. Only then did she return to the living room. You said I'm not serious, she said calmly. Tunde folded his arms defensively. Because this is ridiculous. Ifunanya remained seated at the edge of the couch, clutching her handbag like a life jacket. Tunde's mother stood near the window, silent but attentive. Amara walked to the coffee table and picked up the brown envelope again. You remember 2 weeks ago, she said, when I told you I had to visit the bank. Tunde frowned. Yes. You thought it was for my business account. Wasn't it? Amara shook her head gently. No. Tunde's chest tightened slightly. I went to secure financial independence, she said. He scoffed. You're being dramatic again. Amara ignored the comment. Our joint savings account, she continued. I transferred my contributions out of it. Tunde's eyes widened. You what? Every naira I personally deposited. That's illegal. No, Amara replied calmly. It's accounting. Tunde's mother crossed her arms thoughtfully. How much? Amara answered without hesitation. 32 million. The room went silent. Tunde stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You moved 32 million without telling me. You were busy, she replied simply. Ifunanya whispered under her breath, oh my God. Tunde's breathing grew heavier. You had no right. Amara tilted her head slightly. Interesting choice of words. What does that mean? It means, she said, her voice steady, you are suddenly very concerned about rights. Tunde ran his hand across his face in frustration. You're punishing me. No, Amara corrected. I'm protecting myself. She walked toward the hallway, then returned with a slim folder. Inside this folder, she explained, placing it on the table, are copies of every property document attached to this house. Tunde's heartbeat quickened. You don't own this house alone, he said cautiously. Amara opened the folder and slid one document across the table. Look carefully. Tunde picked it up. His eye scanned the page. Then scanned it again. His hands began to tremble. This was updated. Yes. When? 2 weeks ago. That's impossible. Amara leaned against the arm of the couch. You signed the authorization yourself. His head snapped up. I never signed anything. You did. When? She held his gaze calmly. The day you asked me to help you review those business loan papers. Tunde froze. His memory replayed the moment instantly. He had rushed through a stack of documents while preparing for a meeting. Amara had calmly organized the papers, pointing to places where he needed to sign. He hadn't read everything. He trusted her. Oh my God, he whispered. Amara didn't gloat. Didn't smile. Just nodded slightly. That signature authorized the restructuring of property ownership, she explained. Legally. Tunde's face drained of color. You tricked me. No, she said quietly. I anticipated you. Tunde's mother spoke for the first time in several minutes. Amara, when did you start suspecting? Amara's eyes softened slightly as she answered respectfully. About a month ago. She turned toward Ifunanya. You started visiting more frequently. Sometimes when Tunde wasn't even home. Ifunanya looked down. Then the messages started, Amara continued. Late night. Hidden screens. Tunde swallowed hard. I didn't confront you, Amara said. Because suspicion is not proof. She tapped her phone lightly. But last night gave me proof. Ifunanya's voice trembled. We didn't mean for it to go that far. Amara's gaze sharpened slightly. You mean you didn't mean for me to see it? Ifunanya couldn't answer. Tunde slammed the document down on the table. You manipulated me. Amara shrugged slightly. I adapted. You planned this. Yes. The honesty stunned him. You set me up. No, she replied calmly. You walked into your own trap. Tunde paced the room now, anger rising. This is insane. You're destroying our marriage. Amara looked genuinely puzzled. Our marriage? He stopped pacing. You destroyed it at 2:13 a.m., she said softly. Tunde's mother sighed heavily and sat down. Son, she said quietly, you underestimated your wife. Tunde looked at her helplessly. Mummy. You thought she was naive, his mother continued. But she was watching. Amara walked to the window and looked outside at the quiet street. Lagos traffic hummed faintly in the distance. Life moving forward. I didn't scream, she said calmly. I didn't fight. I didn't wake the neighbors. She turned back toward them. Because emotions make people careless. Her voice lowered slightly. And I needed to be careful. Tunde's anger softened into fear. What else have you done? Amara met his gaze. I spoke to a lawyer yesterday. His stomach dropped. You filed for divorce? Not yet. The room exhaled slightly. But the documents are ready, she added. Tunde collapsed onto the couch, stunned. This can't be happening. Amara watched him quietly. It already did. Ifunanya suddenly stood up. I'm leaving, she whispered. No one stopped her. She moved toward the door slowly, wiping her tears. Before she left, she turned to Amara. I never wanted to hurt you. Amara looked at her. You didn't mind risking it. Ifunanya couldn't respond. She walked out. The door closed behind her. The apartment felt emptier instantly. Tunde rubbed his temples. This is too much. Amara remained composed. You brought her here. That's not the point. That is exactly the point. Tunde looked up at her desperately. What do you want from me? Amara walked back to the coffee table. She picked up a small set of keys and placed them in front of him. The house keys. He stared at them. I want accountability, she repeated. His voice cracked slightly. Amara, please. The calmness in her eyes made him more uncomfortable than anger ever could. You betrayed me in my own home, she said quietly. Tunde's shoulders sagged. Now you'll have to build your own. He looked around the living room, the furniture, the walls, the space he had always taken for granted. You're really throwing me out. Amara shook her head gently. No. She pushed the keys closer to him. You're leaving. Tunde sat there for a long moment, staring at the keys. Then slowly, reluctantly, he picked them up. For the first time that morning, he truly understood something. Amara hadn't lost control. She had taken it. And there was nothing he could do about it. Tunde held the keys in his hand like they were heavier than metal. They were small, just 2 pieces of steel attached to a worn leather keychain Amara had bought years ago during a trip to Abuja. But in that moment, they carried the weight of everything he was losing. Amara, please," he said quietly. The desperation in his voice was new. But it was late. Very late. Amara stood across from him, her posture relaxed, her expression composed. There was no triumph in her face. No anger. Just a calm certainty that made the room feel colder. "You should pack," she said. Tunde stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yes." His eyes searched her face for any hint of hesitation. There was none. "What about us?" he asked weakly. Amara's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Us?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Our marriage." She folded her arms gently across her chest. "You brought another woman into my bed," she reminded him. It didn't go that far. The sentence slipped out before he could stop himself. Amara blinked slowly. For the first time that morning, there was a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. "That far," she repeated quietly. Tunde realized his mistake immediately. "That's not what I meant." But it was too late. Amara shook her head slightly. "You still don't understand." Tunde's mother sat silently on the couch, watching both of them. Her face carried deep disappointment, but she didn't interrupt. "Marriage doesn't collapse because of one moment," Amara continued calmly. Tunde leaned forward. "Exactly. It collapses because of disrespect." The room went quiet again. "You disrespected me," she said. "You disrespected our home. You disrespected our history." Tunde ran his hands over his face. "I made a mistake." Amara nodded once. "Yes. People make mistakes. They do. So why can't we fix this?" Amara studied him for a long moment. Then she asked a simple question. "If I had done the same thing, would you forgive me?" Tunde opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence answered for him. Amara nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." He looked down at the keys again. "This house, we built it together." "No," Amara said gently. "We decorated it together." He frowned. "The foundation was already mine," she explained. Tunde's mother cleared her throat quietly. "That's true." Tunde looked at her in shock. "Mummy?" "The land belonged to her family before the marriage," she said calmly. His heart sank further. Amara continued speaking, not with bitterness, but with clarity. "When we got married, I welcomed you into my space. I shared everything with you." She paused. "You treated that generosity like entitlement." Tunde stood up suddenly. "So what now? I just walk out?" "Yes." "And that's it?" "Yes." His voice rose in frustration. 5 years of marriage and you're just ending it like this." Amara's voice remained steady. "You ended it last night." Tunde paced across the living room again, running his hands through his hair. "This is crazy." Amara didn't respond. "People fight," he said. "Couples have problems. Problems are discussed," she replied. "Betrayal is decided." He stopped pacing. "You're being heartless." Amara tilted her head slightly. "No," she said softly. "I'm being finished." Those words hung in the air like a closing door. Tunde's shoulders dropped. He looked around the living room again. The couch they had chosen together. The wall art from their honeymoon trip to Cape Town. The dining table where they hosted friends. All of it suddenly felt distant. He walked slowly toward the hallway. "Fine," he muttered. Amara didn't follow. From the bedroom came the sound of drawers opening. Closets sliding. Suitcase wheels scraping across the floor. Tunde's mother watched Amara carefully. "You're very calm," she said after a moment. Amara sat down in the armchair. "I cried already," she replied quietly. "When?" Last night. Her voice remained steady. After I finished recording the video, I sat on this same couch. She looked around the room briefly. I cried for about 10 minutes. Tunde's mother listened silently. Then I stopped. Amara continued. Why? Amara's eyes met hers. Because tears don't change facts. The older woman nodded slowly. You're stronger than he realized. Amara didn't answer. 10 minutes later, Tunde returned to the living room with a single suitcase. His movements were slower now. Less confident. Less certain. He placed the suitcase near the door. You're really doing this, he said quietly. Amara looked up at him. Yes. He hesitated. Where am I supposed to go? The question was genuine. Amara thought for a moment. Then she replied calmly. You're an adult. Tunde exhaled slowly. You're cold. Amara shook her head gently. No. She stood up and walked toward him. When she stopped in front of him, their eyes met one final time. You betrayed me in my own home, she said quietly. Her voice was soft. But every word landed with weight. Now build yours from scratch. Tunde's throat tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue again. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he picked up his suitcase. He walked toward the door. Then stopped. Amara. She waited. I did love you. She nodded slowly. I know. He opened the door. Sunlight poured into the apartment. He stepped outside. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Inside the house, silence settled again. Not heavy this time. Peaceful. Tunde's mother stood up and approached Amara. I'm ashamed of my son, she said softly. Amara shook her head. You didn't do this. The older woman studied her face. What will you do now? Amara walked to the window and looked outside. Life continued as usual. Neighbors walking. Cars passing. A new day unfolding. I'll start over, she said. Are you afraid? Amara smiled faintly. No. Why not? She turned slightly. Because I already survived the worst part. Tunde's mother nodded slowly. You're a remarkable woman. Amara didn't respond. After a few minutes, the older woman left as well. The house was completely quiet now. Amara walked through each room slowly. The living room. The kitchen. The bedroom. She paused at the doorway of the room where everything had changed. The bed was neatly made again. Fresh sheets. Clean pillows. No evidence of what happened hours earlier. She stepped inside and opened the curtains. Bright daylight flooded the room. Amara took a deep breath. Then she smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a dramatic one. Just a small, confident curve of her lips. Because sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's silent. And in that quiet moment, standing alone in her home, Amara understood something clearly. She hadn't lost anything. She had simply removed what never deserved to stay.